I'm not sure who wants to meet face to face with the other one less. I mean, Putin hates Zelensky. Zelensky hates Putin. Then again, you can't really.
And Putin always insists that Zelensky is not a legal leader of Ukraine. That he's like his term is over and so on. He always repeats that.
Yeah. So it would be kind of it would be, I think, good for Ukraine to be able to assert, again, Zelensky is still the legitimate president. You're forced to talk to him because he is our president, and so on and so forth. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know that the sequence of meetings is the right one as it was depicted after yesterday, that there would be a bilateral and then a trilateral. I mean, I think that needs to be really thought through carefully, because I think there's a lot of danger as well in a bilateral meeting. As to where it might happen, I mean, I think Hungary would be a terrible venue for Ukraine. I mean, it could happen in Turkey, somewhere in the Gulf. I think the Swiss are sort of open to making some kind of arrangement where they would be able to deal with, the issue of sanctions and the ICC arrest warrant. I mean, part of the issue is Putin has an arrest warrant out for him. And so, he can't formally travel to any member of the International Criminal Court. Now, exceptions can be made and so on and so forth. And I think that's what maybe Swiss are trying to do. I think that would be a fine venue. I mean, genuinely neutral in a European location. But I do think it would be helpful to stage manage a meeting like that to show that Zelensky, has a lot of other support and it's not just him going into this meeting. So maybe you have another kind of multilateral format right before and afterwards, something like that, to show Putin that it's, a much larger set of countries that are backing Ukraine. I'm not sure, but I do think, Ukraine needs to tread very carefully in getting into this direct dialogue with Putin.
Looking back at last week, how much did President Putin actually manage to secure from the meeting in Alaska? And why was Donald Trump so interested in that meeting with Putin in person? And the third question, was it a good idea at all for Trump to invite Putin to the United States to Alaska?
Yeah, I think that the main thing Putin secured was that the conversation over the summer was quite negative towards Russia. Trump was being very critical of Putin for dragging his feet, for continuing to launch attacks on Ukrainian cities. And what he managed to do, Putin, was kind of diffuse this pressure and flip the ultimatum, which was, 50 days and then 10 days. And again, it became very confusing to all of us who were watching it. But ultimately, he sort of called Trump's bluff about the sanctions. I think Trump never had any interest in imposing additional sanctions on Russia. And he said, okay, why don't we just meet? And then that will be the kind of the outcome of this ultimatum. And Trump, because he likes the performance and the theatrics and all of that, I think decided to call that a victory. I don't think it was wise to have the meeting in Alaska, but it wasn't, fatal either. I mean, it had to happen somewhere. I don't read too much into the symbolism. A lot of people are making comments about, literally rolling out the red carpet and all of that. I mean, I wouldn't have done it if I were, in White House protocol. I think it was a mistake, but it wasn't so disastrous, because ultimately, I think for Trump, there wasn't much that he could offer Putin in this meeting to entice him to be more flexible, other than the symbolism and the pageantry of rolling out the red carpet. So from Trump's perspective, giving him the benefit of the doubt, he says, well, what cost is it to me other than some negative media coverage of giving this really nice treatment to Putin? and then hopefully he will be more amenable to doing a deal. I don't think that's how Putin's mind operates. But was it extremely costly to, U.S. interests? I don't think so. I think ultimately nothing really happened from the meeting, and because we had the meetings yesterday with Ukraine and Europe at the White House, whatever progress Putin made in pushing his narratives about territory and the rest of Donetsk Oblast and all these other crazy ideas, I think the script was flipped a little bit yesterday. And so now Ukraine is back in the driver's seat, and we'll see how long that lasts. This is not the end of the story. I mean, this is going to go through many more iterations, and it's going to be a roller coaster. And I have an incredible amount of sympathy for Ukrainians who are watching this and trying to understand what's the outcome and what's the direction of this policy here, because, it's your country that's under attack and your country's future that's at stake here. And unfortunately, from, the perspective of an American expert who's watching what's going on down the street in our White House, it's not linear, and it's not clear where this is going to go. And I think it's going to be many more ups and downs and moments of drama and tension and negative comments about Ukraine and all of that make us think, things are going off the rails, and then it gets back on track. And I don't know where it's going to end up. And I'm sorry to be so uncertain about it, but I have to be honest.
Well, actually, no one knows where it ends up. We don't have this crystal ball with predictions of future. Yeah. I think that we need to mention China in this conversation. How critical is China's role in compelling President Putin to halt his actions in Ukraine? Because often you can hear from different analytics and media personalities that it is China who holds the key to ending the war in Ukraine. How true is this claim, in your opinion?
I think China has been a major enabler of Russian military reconstitution, a major enabler of the war machine in terms of, purchasing Russian oil. But I don't believe that China is actually the critical player, primarily because Chinese leaders are fundamentally unwilling to apply any significant pressure to Russia. And because I think it's dangerous to have China be the critical, point on a fundamental issue of European security. I mean, there have been some discussions about bringing in China as a guarantor of any kind of peace deal. And of course, there was the original Istanbul documents from 2022, which proposed a P5 security guarantee for Ukraine, which obviously would include China. To me, that's not wise, and it doesn't make sense. And Chinese leaders even are not really interested in playing that role. They're happy to mediate and promote, kind of present themselves as this neutral party, which of course they're not neutral, but they're staying on the sidelines. And I think the idea that China is going to swoop in and solve all of this in a way that is advantageous to Ukraine is really, doesn't kind of correspond to the reality of the situation here.